I like having a dominant internal locus of control as much as I possibly can. And if a religion can support and cultivate that in people, then that's awesome.
Why do you build routine and simplicity into your life? It's so that you can free up as much of system 2 as you possibly can to tackle the most complex things you haven't thought about.
It goes back to y'all's system 1 and system 2 conversation. So I use my system 1 to generate religious practices, and then I use my system 2 to generate a snapshot of that practice on a piece of paper, and then someone else picks up that system 2 snapshot, uses their system 1, and then generates the next system 2, and then it just goes and goes and goes and goes.
In any case, I don't see how you can both pursue everything you can be and the agency required with that without staring into the abyss and asking questions that are very dangerous questions to ask.
All right, welcome once again, folks, to another episode of Dragon Slayers. Today we have Jared Manz and Scott Austin here for another episode. This time we're going to be discussing Game 7 of Intro to Psychology, Part 2. And we're going to spin the roulette here in a minute, determine who's going to go first. Let's see. And we got Jared. Good.
All right, let's do it.
Stuff. Here we go. We got these 6 different topics. Which one would you like to choose? We got the dual system, heuristics and biases, prospect theory, cognitive scripts and schemas, cognitive dissonance, and the autokinetic effect experiment. What would you like to go for, sir?
What was the first one?
The dual system.
Sure, let's go with the dual system.
The dual system it is, of course. And with that, the question is, what are the 2 engines of the dual process model of the mind? A moral system and an amoral system. B, a physical system and a psychical system. C, a mathematical system and a value system. Or D, a fast intuitive system and a slow deliberate system.
I'm going to go with D.
D,
a fast intuitive system, yeah, and a slow deliberate one. Yeah.
Absolutely, sir. And the answer is correct. Good job, sir. Starting strong. Good stuff. Good stuff. And with that, we're heading over to Scott. Tell me, Scott, which topic would you like to pick? You got heuristics and biases, prospect theory, cognitive scripts and schemas, cognitive dissonance, or autokinetic effect experiment.
I don't remember the last one, and I want to do it so bad. Let's do the autokinetic effect experiment. I don't remember it. Yeah.
Absolutely, sir. Taking it risky. Playing
yeah, dude.
Living on the edge. I like it. Let's see how it goes. There you go. Who came up with the autokinetic effect experiment, which showed how people tend towards conforming to group norms when presented with ambiguous situations by presenting them with an optical illusion and observing how collective narratives are likely to be persistent? A. Leonard Berkowitz. B. Leon Festinger. C. Mustafa Sheriff. Or D. Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah, I don't remember this. I do remember like the optical illusion of the collective. It's like oh man, I'm thinking he talks about the blue dress versus the white dress, and maybe it's the duck and the rabbit. I don't remember.
This is the one where I'll tell you about the experiment. Yeah. So the experiment.
I'm just gonna go with A.
Okay, absolutely. Are you looking in A?
Send it on A.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm locking in A.
Absolutely. Leonard Berkowitz. And the answer is...
I did it!
Oh, well done. I had no idea.
The experiment was basically like, he had like these people and there was like a light that was moving like from side to side, like different measurements, sometimes 4 feet, 2 feet, 1 feet, and he would like pair them with groups and ask them like, what size do you think that the light is moving? And it would just all be like this type of like illusions.
Okay. Yeah.
But then they would start saying a number, and then eventually the whole group would conform to that number. But then he would start swapping people, and then whenever people would come in, they would conform to whatever the collective narrative would be, sort of thing. So like if they had already decided, oh, it's 3 feet, then the other person would come in and say, no, it's 4 feet, and they'll be like, oh, no, the other two are saying 2 feet. Okay, I'm going to be 2 feet, and it's just 2 feet, and it was just kind of like persist like that. But yeah, good
Mhm.
job. All right, Jared.
Totally knew that.
You got heuristics and biases, prospect theory, cognitive scripts and schemas, and cognitive dissonance. Which one would you like to choose, sir?
Oh, let's go with cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance
Good
it
choice.
is. Here we go. And so the question is, what are the three main ways in which people commonly try to break cognitive dissonance? A. Reduce the importance of dissonant beliefs, add more consonant beliefs that outweigh the dissonant beliefs, and change the dissonant beliefs so that they are no longer inconsistent. B. Appeal to authority to calm down the dissonance, add more consonant beliefs that outweigh the dissonant beliefs, relax the dissonance by finding comfort in social proof. C. Social proof which makes the dissonance be more easily managed by applying the availability heuristic, which makes you believe the probability of the dissonant belief is higher than it really is, and applying the salience heuristic, which gives you a way to maintain the dissonance by focusing on what's salient, or D, using logical fallacies that allow you to maintain the dissonance without challenging your views, such as appeal to authority, appeal to majority, and subjectivism.
I think I'm not certain here, but I think I'm going to go with A.
Absolutely, sir. We're looking in A?
Yeah.
All right, and the answer is correct.
Phew.
Wow, that's amazing. Good job, sir. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, those are the three main strategies that I'm actually okay. I was gonna say who came up with that sort of like arrangement for how to get out of cognitive dissonance, but I think it might give away like another answer in this one. So I'm just gonna hold up on that one for now.
Good for you.
But with that, Scott, tell me, are you going with heuristics and biases, prospect theory, or cognitive scripts and schemas?
I don't remember prospect theory, so do that one.
Absolutely. Here we go. And the question is, prospect theory describes how people make decisions when faced with alternatives that involve risk, probability, and uncertainty. Who came up with this theory? A. Roy Baumeister. B. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. C. Joseph Jastrow and Leonard Berkowitz. Or D. Henry Ricken and Stanley Schachter.
When in doubt, go with A.
A. Roy Baumeister?
Yes.
Absolutely, sir. We're looking in A, and the answer is wrong. I'm so sorry, Scott. I'm not gonna say the answer just yet, just because like maybe Jared has an opportunity to steal the question. But we'll see what happens. I'll tell you guys what the correct answer is in a minute. Tell me, Jared, which one would you like to go for?
Well, I'm glad he eliminated one of the options, so I get a higher probability guess. Can you show me? Can you just show me the? I can't see them on screen right now.
Prospect theory again?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought I had to answer the one he didn't get.
You can pick. You can pick that one, or you can pick the.
No, I don't. That one was too hard. Okay, I don't want that. I don't want that one. I'll go with heuristics and biases.
Absolutely, heuristics and biases. It is. Here we go. And so the question is, what is the definition of the availability heuristic or bias? A. A mental shortcut that involves paying attention to things that are immediately noticeable while ignoring the rest. B. Mental shortcut that involves judging the probability of an event based on how easily information can be retrieved from memory. C. Mental shortcut that involves judging others according to the available social stereotype. And D. Mental shortcut that involves understanding that everything is subjective, and thus all interpretations are available to be assumed.
I'm gonna go with B.
B. A mental shortcut that involves judging the probability of an event based on how easily information can be retrieved from memory.
Yep, that one.
Absolutely. And the answer is correct, good sir. Well done, well done. And with that, we're going back to Scott. Tell me, Scott, which one would you like to go for? Prospect theory or heuristics and biases?
Let's go with the new one.
Sorry, heuristic and biases he did already. Cognitive scripts and schemas,
right?
Yeah, cognitive scripts and schemas,
man.
and prospect theory.
Let's do cognitive scripts and
Absolutely. Here we go. And the question is, what is the difference between a cognitive script and a cognitive schema? A. Scripts are mental frameworks of the world built from past experiences, while schemas indicate a sequence of behaviors relative to a particular situation. B. Scripts are ways in which our ego tells us how to behave in different places, while schemas are the impositions of the superego. C. Scripts are the impositions of the superego, while schemas are ways in which our ego tells us how to behave in different places. Or D. Scripts indicate a sequence of behaviors relative to a particular situation, while schemas are mental frameworks of the world built from past experiences.
Dude, how do you design these questions? This is incredible.
Thank you. I'll take the compliment, Scott. Thank you so much. You're gonna go with D?
Let's go with D. Yeah.
D. Scripts indicate a sequence of behaviors relative to a particular situations, while schemas are mental frameworks of the world built from past experiences.
Yes. Please.
Absolutely. We're looking in D. And the answer is correct. So basically, scripts would be the way in which you, like you have a sense of how you have to act in a certain particular situation. I think Campbell's example was when you go to a restaurant, you have like this set of steps that you take, before as you go through the whole restaurant experience. You sit down, you get a menu, you order food, that you have like these different courses, then you pay the bill and stuff like that. And if it were swapped in different ways, you will be like, that's not part of my script, you're going out of script. And then the schema is how you already you're seeing the world in a certain way, and how you construct it based on like different experiences and past memories that you apply into it. So very good, very good. And with that, Jared, you get prospect theory. You get a chance at
Man, I really feel like you just need to tell us the answer and give nobody points, because I won't feel right if I guess. I have no idea.
Well, but like but I guess you can guess.
Yes.
Okay.
And like
Yes.
like if you have it wrong, then like Scott will have another chance, and then he'll have even more probability.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay. Yeah. In that case, I'll go with B.
You go with B, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Yeah, absolutely. And so the answer is correct.
Oh,
Good
jeez.
job. Yes, that very famous duo of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, they came up with this theory that actually it was very cool that Scott picked Baumeister, because Baumeister sort of like picks it up from them as well, and then he writes bad is stronger than good from that same type of prospect theory. But they are the first ones to introduce the term, and it's basically the fact that usually the common example is like, would you prefer for me to give you $500 now for sure, or like a chance at $5,000, but you have like it's only like a 50% chance. Most people will go with the safe bet, with the guaranteed bet, rather than to take the
Protecting against downside rather than pursuing upside.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's sort of like what prospect theory says. But then Baumeister kind of like picks it up and then expands it, because then he applies it to basically everything, like where we can say like, okay, we experience negative things even, much more stronger than like positive things, but like it's all also developed in Daniel Kahneman's, especially it's very widely developed as well in like Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow in his book. Is very, very interesting because he also points out something similar like that, like say like you when you get told off, it's much more impactful to your personality that rather than you receiving a reward for doing something good. So it's kind of like, it's dealing with the same type of like psychological phenomena, or at least similar. But with that, it's time for some sparring, folks. Here we go. So Jared is on the lead, so Scott, you get the first pick. Tell me, which one would you like to go for? The dual system, scripts and schemas, and when prophecy fails.
Well, the one I'm going to do the worst at is when prophecy fails. So do that one.
Absolutely, sir. Sounds like a plan. I like how you live dangerously. I like that. All right. So in his book, Leon
The
Festinger,
Nietzschean approach to the game show.
in his book, Leon
let's
Festinger
see this,
describes in powerful ways how cognitive dissonance develops in social settings. Well, it is easy to maintain that this is a phenomenon present in all religions. This actually makes a very strong case for the validity of very specific strands of Christianity, such as Orthodoxy or Catholicism, because the focus, explicitly stated in their catechesis, is on personal moral transformation, rather than solely seeking external validation with miracles, which may open the door for cognitive dissonance if proven false. I'm gonna give a little bit of like context to this. Festinger is
which
actually
is dumber for me.
Me too.
Yeah, so Festinger has this whole theory of like he was very, very interested in cognitive dissonance. So he wrote this book called When Prophecy Fails, examining like this cult where like they were predicting like the end of the world or something, some people, and then he was tricking out all of these people, and then of course like it didn't happen, and so Festinger documents the whole thing. But basically what this is trying to say is that a lot of religions, because they are always seeking like ways to confirm for their religion as in terms of like miracles, they are more prone to have like cognitive dissonance if like those things that they are expecting to happen don't happen. But like if you put the attention, the focus inside of like personal internal transformation, then you might be able to circumvent that, and so maybe it makes a strong case for certain specific religions where they are like focused on it is, like the whole mystical element is there too, but like the whole focus of it is on like personal responsibility and personal transformation, and so
am I arguing the likelihood of cognitive dissonance in people who are religious, or against that? Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah, kind of, but also with this statement, you would be arguing that most religions are prone to have cognitive dissonance, except Orthodoxy and Catholicism, and very few specific religions. Like if you, or you can, like go against it and kind of like, disagree with some parts of the statement, these ones are like, also, by the way, also a quick disclaimer as well. These are also kind of like at the edge of my, what would you say, of my understanding as well. So they're very hard, like going to be a very hard wrestling, like sort of like match. But it's it's also why it's kind of like fun to try to like think through all of these things. So I always, yeah.
It's a tough question.
All right, Scott. Let's see what we got in here. This is definitely a slightly more tricky one, and it's like a mouthful as well in terms of like a lot of all of those concepts that are in there. Like it's a lot. It's like a tangled up situation there for sure. But let's take a look. Let's approach it from this point of view. There has to be, you know, clearly there is a sense in which we cannot say all religions are qualitatively the same, because then obviously like it would go against the law of no contradiction in logic. Like, we cannot say that one thing is one thing is and isn't at the same time, you know. So for example, in that sense, like Christianity cannot be the truth and also not the truth, and in the same way, all the other religions. And so to commit to one over the other ones would necessarily mean that one of them is, you know, that you have to prioritize one over the other ones, you know, in terms of like how you commit to that narrative. But that's only from the commitment side of things. But now let's think about it in the sense of like, how can we actually tell if it's going to be prone to give you cognitive dissonance or not? So let's take, for example, certain strands of Hinduism, for example, where they have a lot of commitment to rituals and things like that. So what happens if in if I were to commit to the Hinduism religion, and my part of my religion would be, I'm gonna make a sacrifice of shaving my head to get something that I want or that I need, you know, to be able to continue to move forward. And then I shave my head, and then expecting for the miracle to happen so that I can, you know, keep going with my life, and then it doesn't happen. That will make me more prone to get cognitive dissonance. Whereas if the way in which I am utilizing my religion, it's in terms of like assuming personal responsibility for the actions that I take in the physical world, and also, you know, committing to me being the only source of like the only um, place where I can put the blame into for when things are, you know, not going in the way that I expect them to go, or like according to how I am acting in the world. And then that is less prone to give me cognitive dissonance, because I don't have to commit to something that is outside of my control entirely. You know, it's more like I'm more likely to have control over the ways that I am able to like um, I guess like change the behaviors that I am doing to be able to, you know, move past like whatever it is that is eh, I guess like not like suppressing me or not letting me like move forward. Whereas if I am looking for external um validation of my faith, you know, constantly, then I will probably be more likely to have cognitive dissonance as I move you know, uh, as I move forward in the world and I commit to that religion. Do you see how maybe perhaps like in that sense, like we could say why religions that commit to um, having the focal point as a personal internal moral transformation, rather than, you know, external miracles to validate my faith. Rather, like I validate my faith with what I see. It's I'm with how I'm seeing, I'm being transformed through the process of committing to doing certain actions in the world, right? Rather than expecting something external to happen for me to continue to validate that faith. You know what I mean? Or like, for example, in the case of like the cult example, where they were like doing all of these different things, but expecting, you know, expecting something that is completely out of their control, like for example, like the end of the world happening, to validate their belief. That would like give them cognitive dissonance. But if like I'm doing something that it's also making me more, giving me more agency, giving me more responsibility, and transforming myself, but not you know, not like the only thing that I can like come back and say, yeah, if it didn't happen is because I myself was not, you know, doing the right, I was not taking the right approach. And so there's no need for me to have cognitive dissonance in that sense, because then I can just know that's not the way that I should be acting, and then maybe I should course correct and try again and continue to move forward. I don't know if I don't, am I being a little
It
bit
did
too
make sense.
confusing?
I think what I heard was no, I think what I heard was some religions use external milestones, and when those are proven false, it can cause cognitive dissonance. And some religions don't use that, and that can actually give people pillars of regulation so that they don't have as much cognitive dissonance. Did I
Yeah, to a
understand that
sense.
correctly?
Like, I mean, there is a sense in which obviously like the mystical aspect of it is still present in these religions as well, but they don't rely on it. You know what I mean? it's there, and there's no need for, say, for example, an Orthodox Christian can very easily believe that Christ is going to come back in his body, and be fully resurrected in his body, you know, uh, but still not give him cognitive dissonance, because he's not just is not waiting on that to make his religion valid. He's creating a relationship with God through his actions constantly, because it's the focal point is in the internal transformation. And so, whereas like if you see other religions where you say like, no, you have to believe that this thing, it's going to happen,
Yeah, it'll be this
but
Saturday, the world's going to end. And then Saturday comes, the world doesn't end. And it's like, well, what happened?
exactly. Whereas, like, for example, maybe Orthodoxy will say, yeah, Jesus is going to come back at some point, but it's not for us to be thinking when is he going to come back. It's not for us to be saying like, or making all of these different type of crazy theories about how is he going to come back, or try to tell ourselves like, that we can know how he's going to come back and all of these things. Rather is saying like, well, we can easily think that that's going to happen, but we don't have to, concern ourselves too much with how that's going to happen. We have to concern ourselves with being the best version of ourselves to be ready for that moment. And so it puts the focal point in the individual rather than to put it out on, like, say, God, uh, to make those manifestations. You know what I mean? It's not, it's, yeah,
Yeah, man, that one puts me up against a really hard wall to argue against.
I see what you mean.
Um, I could make an argument against that, but I think on the inside I would feel like I wouldn't be using any type of reasonable logic.
That's fair, sir.
So
Um, like absolutely, like it's up to you, absolutely. Like if like, so would you say like you would agree then with this statement from that point of view, from that perspective?
I agree with the idea that if you have a higher focus on external objects, that you'll have a higher chance of cognitive dissonance than if you have a higher focus on, internal things. I like having a dominant internal locus of control as much as I
Yes,
possibly can. And if a religion can support and uh, cultivate that in people, then that's awesome.
I see what you mean, but then let me see if I can now flip it, like, because now it seems like you're like agreeing with this. So let me see if like I can now try to assume the other side of the argument, and like try to like push
Yeah.
against it. So we said, well,
Okay.
you know, as long as we have like the internal locus of control, we're in control of like how we are um, behaving, and so it's less likely for us to have cognitive dissonance, because we're not relying on something external to tell us how what is it that we need to think. But man, it's actually,
Well, I like
I'm
to have
gonna
a
be honest.
balance, right? I think we need, yeah, we need both. We need a little bit of external and a little bit of internal. And I don't think it's a good idea to have too much of one thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely, actually, that's very true and very wise, because like, okay, but how would you say then, like, would be a good example or in where we rely of like external things to tell us, well, to which way we would have to
Oh, I
commit to
love
something
business.
external? Sir?
Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to do that in business decisions, and it's not fun, but it's what you have to do, and it creates long-term success. You have to do it as a parent.
Mm.
You have to tell the kid no.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So like there is a sense where you actually have to have faith in something greater to a certain extent, like whether in this case is God, or in other cases it might be just to have faith in the goodness of other people which whom you're doing business with, or have faith in the overall trajectory of where you're taking your kids. That is going to turn out good from the things that you're doing, and otherwise you wouldn't be able to, I guess, continue to move forward. There is a sense in which you need a certain element of faith on something, like, that goes like past the immediate reliance on you, because then you wouldn't be able to just continue to move forward. Is that what I sort of understand from your point of view? Yeah,
That
that's
sounds
actually
like
very
a
good.
good gist. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually very great.
I
Very
like how
great.
this isn't a debate.
Well, I actually think that that's actually a great rebuttal to this, because to a certain extent, you're putting you know you are putting like the good side of all of these religions on the in there, because then you're saying, like, well, to a certain extent it doesn't matter, because we all are born in different cultures, and we need something transcendent like that to have faith on, to be able to keep on moving forward. But then what I would say to that then is, like, yeah, but then there's different qualities of the thing that you put your faith on, that will actually yield a different result depending on how you put your faith on. Depending on the quality of the thing that you put your faith on. It's like, for example, like, if I were to put my faith on that
Well, I
money,
think
for example, is going to get me everywhere, that's much lower good than if I were to put, I don't know, love as like the thing that is going to get me somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, so it depends on, like, what are the things that
sure.
I put my faith on that is actually going to yield the quality of the things, how the things are going to unfold in front of me. Wouldn't you say?
I think all I have to say to that is the pattern that you described is consistent, like you said, across cultures, and the qualitative assessment can be done according to each, ecosystem. Because my qualitative assessment where I'm located is different than someone in Africa, or I don't know, somewhere else.
Yeah. But I
So
guess you could
it's
say,
yeah, it just depends, I guess.
yeah, I can see how that it's probably very true as well. But I guess you could also say that in such an interconnected era in which we live in today, um, the exposure and, like, the fact that we are more likely to increasingly encounter all of these different ways of seeing the world, and then we can also do the qualitative comparison and then tell, well, maybe I was born in this one culture, but maybe that those beliefs are not quite as the quality of those beliefs are not quite as good as these other ones that I am encountering here. So maybe I ought to change my strategy or change the way that I am committing in terms of my faith to this set of beliefs rather than the other ones. In that sense, like, if
I don't.
if if those, like, if there's certain religions that actually get to spread the word of their religion more widely, and then people start, would you say then that it's a type of I guess moral responsibility to also pick up on those and commit to them as well, if they can see that there's a qualitative difference between what they are believing in?
A good option. I think it's wise to choose something that you feel you should adapt to. I think that answers the question. If you think it's better and stronger than what you have now, and you're capable of disassociating from those attachments that you have to whatever you currently believe, then that's amazing that you can shift and adapt like that. I don't know the likelihood of deeply entrenched beliefs just wiping because they're like, oh wow, that thing over there looks awesome. I don't know the likelihood of all that.
Yeah, right on. I see what you mean. I see what you mean. All right, Scott. I think you really got me this time, but I'm going to get you next time for sure. Ah.
What you think, Jared? That was tough.
It's
Sorry.
tough. I thought you guys salvaged a reasonable conversation out of it.
All right. That was really tough. I'm not gonna lie. That was really, really hard. I should have, like, foresaw that, actually, like, cause I can tell, like, that this one is like, it's a big tangle of stuff. So, but, like, I thought it was very good, Scott. I think you did very, very good, especially for my, my ambiguity, I guess, in that statement. But it was very, very good, good sir. But with that,
That's
Jared,
good.
tell
I
me,
mean, I learned a lot.
Well, I mean,
how would you
given the
rate it?
range of difficulty, I think I have to give you guys a 5.
All right,
So
right on. That's a 5
very
for
generous
Scott.
for the guy
And
that
tell,
scuffed it really bad.
I think you did very good, sir. But tell me, how would you rate yourself on this one?
I don't think I did so hot because I couldn't comprehend it. So I'm going to give myself like let's say a 2. 1 point for getting through it and 1 point for kind of responding.
Are you sure? Plus 2 points?
Yes.
Man,
Absolutely, sir.
he picks the hardest topic and then beats himself up for it too. Man.
Absolutely, sir. No problem. Good stuff. Good stuff. Uh, and with that, then we're back to Jared. Tell me, which topic would you like to pick? We got dual system, script and schemas, or when prophecy fails.
Yeah, let's go with dual system.
Dual system it is. The purpose of cognition is to eventually get System 1 to match the world entirely. The way the brain tries to do this is by using System 2 to carefully analyze and learn from the world, and then turn that deliberate and careful thinking into fast and effortless, wise actions. Would you like to argue for or against this statement?
I think I'm leaning more towards against it.
Absolutely. Let me just call in the dragon 1 second. All right, Jared. Tell me what you got. How are you gonna refute this?
Yeah, so I mean, when you talk about System 1, you're talking about the automatic system, and System 2, you're talking about a more controlled and deliberate system, correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
So I guess the way the questions written, it had me thinking about whether or not the objective of System 2. I read the question as though it's saying, the objective of the controlled system is to figure out the world and automate it for yourself. But or at least that's how I interpret it, and am I interpreting that correct? Is that fair?
Yeah, to a certain degree, but let's just say that, think about it this way. There is a sense in which the world is an inexhaustible fount of intelligibility. There's way too much information for us to take in all at once. So we have to have a way to process all of that vast amount of information and kind of like narrow it down and you know, what would you say? Summarize it, so to speak, roughly, and we sort of like make a type of projection in our head of how we think the world actually looks like according to our own internal mental predictions, but this is not only in the sense of like phenomenology, in the sense of like how we're looking and seeing things, but it could also be said in terms of behaviors, for example, so like we can know how to act uh, in the best way. I don't know. Let's say, like, we can take any virtue, for example. Okay, like what's to be courageous, and then you can sort of like have a sort of schema or like yeah, a schema of what being courageous means, But you're you'll have to actually encounter all of the different situations in which uh, being courageous will actually be useful to you. And then as you learn from those, then you can build a bigger and bigger schema. And then that schema, those schemas are what actually being stored into System 1, so to speak.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like as you build, so System 1 is very good at creating these sort of like narratives and give you the confidence to be able to, commit to like something like effortlessly. Like, like I guess, for example, like say you have I don't know, let's take Jordan Peterson, for example. Like the fact that he's so fluent and able to give a lecture on psychology must be also because he had to do a lot of mental effort utilizing System 2 for a very long period of time learning something to the point where he can like free
Yeah.
flow in giving a lecture because all of those schemas are already in his mind and they just flow out easily as he just like, they come into mind and he's trying to think through something. And so in that sense, like you could think about System 1 not not
Yeah.
only in terms of like how we experience the world phenomenologically, but also how we act in the world and how we learn things, and basically in every single mental process
Yeah.
that we do require these two systems. But perhaps what the statement is trying to get at is that in System 1 is kind of like the main character of the story, where it's trying to grab all of those informations and put them into a cohesive or coherent narrative to help us, like, run through the world, or go through the world,
Yeah.
basically.
So no, that's clear. That's sort of that is similar to how I interpreted it as well. So I would say the risk with that is that System 1 is also where your bad habits exist and where old behaviors that no longer serve you in the new environment exist. So on one hand, you are growing and developing, but on the other hand, you're optimizing your motivations. Your priorities are changing slightly. uh, I think you could make a case that, the sooner you can absolutely fix your motivations, the likelihood that you're going to be, and that those motivations can stay consistent through time, regardless of how much entropy enters your life, will probably increase your ability to optimize System 1, to automate as much as you can. But even in doing that, I don't think of it in terms of doing it to no longer rely on System 2. It's almost like, you why do you build routine and simplicity into your life? It's so that you can free up as much of System 2 as you possibly can to tackle the most complex things you haven't thought about. So, it's with System 2 that you can go and explore your dissonance, for example, which is alive and well in System 1 and deceiving you every single day. So I think that's where I would say I view it more like System 1 is a massive opportunity to optimize a lot of capacity. It's like when you talk about people who are extremely impressive human beings and you go, well, how did they do that, right? And it's like, well, they've automated a lot of their high functioning behavior, but they've also freed up a lot of capacity to very deliberately and with focused attention tackle the most complex problems that they aren't able to automatically solve.
Mm, I see. So, in a sense, what you're saying is there is a sense in which this actually never ends, and then System 1 is actually, because it's trying to automatize everything, it's more prone to self-deception, because it might try to have a holistic picture of everything, but to the extent that obviously we cannot grasp everything all at once, it has to take shortcuts, and then it falls into different traps. But then also, you cannot also even if you were to completely I guess automatize those effortful tasks that you do with System 2 and put them all in System 1. There's a sense in which you cannot get rid of System 2 entirely, because then you wouldn't be able to continue to grow in the world. um is
That's
this sort of like
I
what I
think you're
understand?
I think it's a good, yeah, well said. And just to reinforce the final point, because the desire for growth, as I understand it, I mean, it doesn't go away even in the journey to becoming, or in the Maslow's hierarchy, or any kind of model about the aspirational self. I think the power seeking continues, and so it's through System 2 that I view that like your driving engine for pursuing growth uh, forever. And I can imagine, with things like aging, I tend to think that responsibility just increases with age, like entropy and responsibility and age, because eventually you hit a point where, you're worried about your kid in one decade, and then suddenly you're worried about your own health in the next decade. And these kinds of things can distract a lot of energy from your ability to tackle problems. It's a very um, your automated system isn't designed for that set of problems based on the decade prior. So I think it is part of the journey to continue to seek to optimize your automatic system and then update it for the new challenges that you're presented with.
Yeah, I see how your argument actually of not trying to dispense with any side of the equation, but actually kind of like use them, to continue to move forward is actually very, very powerful because it's it even if we were to say that we have mastered, say, like all virtues and stuff, that doesn't change the fact that there's still the world continues to evolve, and like what we might even we might know how to act morally now, and you could say like to act morally in accordance with the good, it's something that could be applied in the same way, say 100,000 years ago, and 2,000 years ago, and now, or 100,000 years into the future. But even if we learn how to act in the most virtuous way for for good, that doesn't change the fact that we still need to learn how to adapt to the evolving world outside of us, and that that is a very good argument. But then let's think about it. If we think about this in a hypothetical scenario when we have completed the whole of the history of time, would you say that perhaps, like, obviously it's something so hard to conceive because then we will have to run the entirety of like the universe, but then wouldn't you say that if we think about our cognition as something that was designed, then could it be said that the this dual dynamic um, between these two systems, and the fact that one system with the deliberate effort is transmitting into the other system this type of schemas that we tell ourselves to be able to learn how to act and in the world. And if we learn to acquire the right set of schemas, then we get to have like we get to be more prone to be aligned or have better predictive processing, to continue to move forward. But then if, let's say, like, we have already gone through everything, and then system 2 has already passed everything that it needs to pass into system 1, like from a teleological point of view, like in the sense, like, say, what is the purpose then of system 1 and system 2? If we run it to the end of it, would you say that it's fair to say that the purpose is to eventually get system 1, and then if we were to get there, if there's nothing else for system 2 to learn because it has already learned everything, in this hypothetical scenario, wouldn't you say that system 1, then the purpose is for system 1 to actually get there so that it's completely effortlessly, and it's already kind of like it has already basically learned the whole of existence, I suppose, like from that.
I'm not anchored in the hypothetical scenario anywhere. So can you tell me? Can we try just again? I just couldn't follow it. So what
Okay,
is? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I know it's like a little bit abstract and weird
I
to
want to try
explain,
and follow you. I want to try and follow you.
no, yes, absolutely. So let's think. There's these two systems, system 1 and system 2. System 2 is doing the effort, and then it's passing over the information to system 1. And then system 1, let's say, like, it continues to build bigger and bigger and bigger all of these schemas that it's learning from system 2. And then system 2 doesn't have to worry about, say, learning how to write. Maybe at the beginning is very effortful, but then once you learn how to write, you can do it like almost like automatically, because system 2 has already passed that over to system 1. And then let's say, like, we take that, like, let's say, like, all of the things that there are to learn in the world are in a list, and then the list, system 2 is just checking them, every single item in the list, and passing it over to system 1. Like, if that is the case, when we run through the whole list, wouldn't that be, like, when I say that from a teleological perspective, like, say, what is the purpose of system 2 and what is the purpose of system 1? If system 2's purpose is to pass the information to system 1 and make it effortlessly for us to have these schemas, then wouldn't you say that, yes, while system 1 might be prone to self-deception as it doesn't have the entire picture yet, but if you were to have already the entire picture, then it wouldn't need then system 2 anymore, because then that's already having run the entirety of, basically learned the entirety of existence. Although,
Okay.
granted, this is a super hard hypothetical, probably very unlikely to achieve, but
So I feel like you're talking about system 1 as though it's capable of knowing everything all at once, so that functioning optimally becomes purely intuitive. Is that
to an extent, but not kind of like by design. Sort of like its purpose is to learn it all, but through the aid of system 2.
so? I just don't think that it all can be learned, and I mean, or let's look at it through another lens. Let's imagine that it could all be learned, and so then I imagine you'd be infinitely resilient, infinitely regulated, totally optimized, and that sounds like that sounds like some kind of an experience that's void of experience, some kind of existence that's void of experience altogether. Because when I think about what kinds of things should trigger actions for system 2, so how should I start? How do I know when there's something that needs solving? The emotional system, is sort of a lizard brain trigger for us to say something's off or something's good. Do more of this, do less of that. So those are your triggers. But in a hypothetical scenario where you've optimized, I almost feel like that would be the AI model of a human being rather than an experiential form. And then, and I do think the world is at least sufficiently, the universe is at least sufficiently complex that it's hard for me to conceptualize a hypothetical scenario where a human being can absorb the vastness of objective reality. I don't think it can even be conceptualized. So it's hard for me to say that there wouldn't be a problem left to wonder about, or uh, a potentially meaningful problem to wonder about.
Yeah, I see what you mean. There's a sense in which, like, clearly we'll always likely need both systems to, like probably like the goal of, or at least what I understand that your point is that probably the goal is not to just focus on like system 1 trying to learn it all, but like actually to learn how to integrate both of these systems so that they can act
Absolutely.
in a proper, or what would you say, like have a very good coupling together so that they're actually less prone to self-deception from both
Yeah.
sides.
I mean, I
But
think about anxiety reduction in that context, right? Like if someone is feeling a lot of anxiety, and it's about something that they're consciously engaging with or hiding from, but it causes them a lot of their, base load anxiety levels and things like that. I feel like these are the things that you can bring into the conscious domain, process, integrate, and then all of a sudden your system 1 automatic system baseline anxiety drops, and you've increased capacity, because you're not carrying some background load on the system.
That's very interesting. Let me just push back with this last idea. And there's this idea in the Christian tradition that says that basically at the end of times, we will be resurrected as well with a type of heavenly body. Wouldn't presumably, obviously, like this type of heavenly body would be light, and to that extent mean that there's no the consequences of sin or death, they're not anymore present. And like there's this idea as well, like also in the Christian tradition, where you know the whole reason we can actually learn, it's actually part of the consequence of the fall as well, because the one, as we were saying, like the fact that there's this like concept of anxiety, and how we're trying to reduce anxiety, and like emotion being like a very big marker for how we're developing, and that actually being like a very key thing that we need to be able to learn. Like we need to experience positive or negative emotion in accordance to our actions to be able to tell whether our actions are good or bad, and how they're like interacting with the world. So if we were to understand this type of, like, let's call it a metaphor or narrative, for lack of a better word right now, perhaps myth might be like a better word, but in the proper sense, um wouldn't you say that it's kind of like pointing at something like that we would be in a state where perhaps you know think about it like what happens to your soul if you would have been properly purged, and then say if we understand like the concept of the mind as something equating the soul, maybe perhaps they're not the same thing, but like to an extent they are very similar. And then if we understand cognition having these two systems, uh could it be that the soul in its purest form would be just system one, as it like it knows everything because it's connected to the one God, and so it can know the whole of the entirety of the things, and it doesn't have a need to learn anymore, but just to enjoy and participate on the joy of existence with the creator himself. Eh, wouldn't you say that too, from a philosophical point of view, that could be something that might be tenable?
There's there's a lot there. Okay, so are you asking about the narrative significance of uh, of this yeah, is it about the narrative relevance to existence or the afterlife? I'm not totally following the question.
Yeah, I guess it's, let's say, yeah, let's say, let's understand it from the point of view of the afterlife, for example. So let's say like our the whole purpose of existence, if you understand it from a religious perspective, is that you're trying to learn how to be aligned with the good. And if you align yourself with the good, then you're able to an extent, be part of the body of the good, or
Right.
join the good of what it is the good. And so if you're already at that state, would you actually need a system two in your cognition, or would the system two would already be regarded as um, not necessary anymore, something that we can like cast away, because there's no need for us to do any deliberate effort into learning anything else, because to an extent, if we're already part of that body, we will already have access to it all. We would just be.
So okay, so in terms of existence, so is there's this concept of an optimized state or complete totally aligned with what it is, the essence of good. um I'd maybe use psychological or language from psychology to say something more like, um, what is it, self-transcended, uh, something like that. I think even someone who would, have achieved everything that they can be and reach the top of Maslow's hierarchy psychologically, it, let's say even at this moment somewhere in the world, I think that person is as likely to, well, I think they're still susceptible to the flu, for example, or heartburn, or anything that can arise to disrupt nirvana, so to speak. And so to me, in a practical sense, um, you pursue you pursue full alignment with the essence of goodness to get glimpses of it, and those are signals that you were aligned for a moment, and then you have to use your system too to go and assess how you suddenly became misaligned. It could be a bad night's rest, maybe. It's hard to say at that stage of optimization. To talk about anything beyond existence, for me, it's not super useful to get into it. I mean, it's we could probably connect back the first conversation you and Scott had to some extent. I was going to talk about the risks of dogmatic belief in creating dissonance. I think it's almost implicit in a dogmatic belief that dissonance would be a byproduct. So I don't think it's really, for me anyway, it's not super useful to try and guess about things that cannot be known, um, other than to acknowledge them as things that cannot be known.
I see. Yeah, that is a very that's a very powerful and interesting way to approach it. Absolutely, Jared, you got me this time, but I'm gonna get you next time for sure. Ah.
You stay awake for that, Scott?
that was
That was
that
an
was
awesome exchange.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. I really enjoyed the chat. Thanks, Juan. That was good.
Thanks, guys. That was very, very good. Very good sparring for sure. But tell me, Scott, how would you rate Jared today?
2005, because it made me think of so many things like to build on y'all's thoughts. It was awesome. I already like wrote a couple things down in the middle of that, and now I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole later.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Great stuff. Great stuff. And so tell me, Jared, how would you rate yourself on this one?
Oh, well, I'm really happy to hear that, Scott, and I hope you share with me some of the reflections you have. I'd be happy to continue the conversation around it. I thought that was a great question, Juan. I'll give myself a 4.
Absolutely, sir. Perfect. Good stuff. Good stuff. And with that, we're heading back to Scott. Tell me, Scott, which one of these three would you like to go for? The dual system, script and schemas, or when prophecy fails?
Scripts and schemas.
Scripts and schemas it is, sir. Let's see what we got. Religious practices are very valuable because they allow you to prime you cognitively with the right type of mindset, giving you schemas and scripts in order to navigate the world in the wisest way. Would you like to go for or against this statement?
I want to go for it because I disagree with it personally.
So you want to go, so you want to agree with it because you disagree with it? Absolutely, sir.
Yes.
That sounds like a plan. Okay, let me just call in the dragon. 1 second.
I think it's good. Yes, I agree and disagree. I could whatever.
Absolutely, sir. Good stuff. So tell me, how you gonna defend this then?
So if you have these mimetically strong ideas and you just reinforce them in humans, it will produce healthy and regulated humans over and over and over again. And that has been repeated historically over and over and over again. If you tell the story and you reinforce its behavior behind the narrative, it produces, regulation, it produces cooperation, and it works.
I see. But there is a sense in which also you could say that the schemas that some religions produce, they not necessarily will have to um, be a source of wisdom. There's a sense in which you can like commit to certain types of schemas that might actually be a stumbling stone or a stepping stone for you. So to that extent, how can we actually say that they are that valuable, or how will we be able to tell which ones are the valuable ones and which ones aren't?
I think because of the observable world and whether or not it's still being used today, and maybe maybe it's not fair to count, but I think that's an okay metric. You can be like, there's 1 billion people still doing it. That seems okay. Of course, that's a horrible fallacy, but I'm arguing for it.
Absolutely. I guess it kind of is a fallacy because that would be an appeal to majority, right? Mm, but then let's say,
Yeah, but it has mimetic strength, right? Like it's lasted for a long time, so it's got to be
yeah.
valuable to somebody.
Oh, yeah, I can see
Then the
how that
question is, what do you mean by valuable?
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a good question actually. Well, like how would you define valuable in the sense that you would say like that, it's very very valuable for us to commit to them.
Because it produces mass cooperation and reproduction. And
What about like
the continuation of the human species is good, I think.
yeah, that's a pretty good metric, I would say. But like, let's see, for example, there's also I can think of many examples, especially in the political climate that we are on today, where different religions actually are sort of guiding people in the opposite direction, where like they're committing people to a certain type of say group dynamic, and then they sort of like make people fight against each other rather than actually be, you know uh, generate cooperation, generate life, generate like good things. That there's a sense in which like to an extent people seems to be more a large amount of people, or at least like in the way in which it's impactful with the culture and like yeah, geopolitically, a large number of people seem to be more concerned with the things that are actually more destructive and detrimental from certain religions rather than like the things that are, you know, I guess we could say valuable about them. How can we how can we
I would
measure, like whether it's worth it, the value, in comparison with like its downsides or like its ways in which it can be, you know, a source of I guess of a fall, like to put it in like more, metaphorical language.
I think I would only push back because you brought in geopolitical and politics in the claim, and that to me is a straw man because it's outside of the topic. And how can we measure it? I just go back to how we would measure history and its success.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I guess you could say it is a straw man, but like it is a reality nonetheless. Like, say for example, think about what's happening right now in like Iran, for example. There is an element where a lot of this has to do with like religious commitment as well, um, how can we say like, okay, this religions in general, without actually like qualifying certain religions as like, I guess in a sense being more superior than others, like how can we say that religions in general are, a wise way to navigate the world when sometimes they lead to making people commit atrocities as well?
Because that's a moral and relative judgment, and reality doesn't really much care about that.
So you're saying kind of like, well, it's not so much about the nature of religion. This is more like a human nature, and like whether it is religion that is dictating this type of sort of poor moral, um, I guess, behavior. It could also be any other thing, like whether it's one religion or maybe like a scientific commitment or maybe even like a national pride or things like that. It can be different elements can actually, I guess, incentivize that type of behavior. It doesn't really have to be religious, in its core. Is that what you're saying, sort of?
I don't think so. I think it's more like religious practices rise and they have risen independently among the world and multiple cultures. You know, these people have never touched these people, but for some reason, these both groups have religious practices. So maybe that is something that humans have to form. And in their immediate environment, I think that it's very valuable to navigate the world. It keeps happening. It keeps rising. So
Yeah.
something has value.
So yeah, so you're saying also to an extent that the fact that it's been so persistent, but also the fact that I guess people don't have to rediscover a wise practice from scratch, but they can just like pick it up from whatever their ancestral legacy just leaves behind, and then they can just pick it up and then run with it, and then that saves them a whole bunch of this very deliberate effort and like a lot of like different making mistakes along the way to figure it out. Then somebody can figure it out and then write it down and pass it along to other generations so that they can just like embrace it and circumvent that whole
Yeah.
thing.
It goes back to y'all's System 1 and System 2 conversation. So I use my System 1 to generate religious practices, and then I use my System 2 to generate a snapshot of that practice on a piece of paper. And then someone else picks up that System 2 snapshot, uses their System 1, and then generates the next System 2. And then it just goes and goes and goes and goes. And
I see. That's a very, very, very strong argument. I have to say, Scott, and I have to say, uh, you know, to be entirely honest, I think my how do I put this? Yeah, to be entirely honest, I think my I guess cognitive capacity is also starting to slow down because it's kind of late. But I also
You're
think
doing
that
great.
it was a very good, very very powerful argument, and I'm gonna get you the next time though, for sure. Ah.
Ah. Yeah, now I need to think how I would disagree with that.
All
Well, I think
right,
that's what I'm going to end up taking.
absolutely. Right on, guys. Great stuff. Great stuff. So tell me, Jared, how would you rate Scott for this one?
I'll give him a 4 for this one.
Four,
Yes.
absolutely.
Go
And
lower.
tell me,
2.
Scott, two. What?
Man, this guy is so rough on himself. Scott.
All right. +2 it is, of course. No problem. And so with that, we're heading back to Jared. Tell me, Jared.
Let's keep the
What,
conversation going on this topic.
absolutely. Let's do it again. Here we go. Uh the statement religious practices are very valuable because they allow you to prime you cognitively with the right type of mindset, giving you schemas and scripts in order to navigate the world in the wisest way. Would you like to go for or against this statement?
I will answer the for or against when you answer this one question for me. So
Absolutely.
I can interpret a religion as being nothing more than a shared set of deeply held values, maybe the most deeply held values. What
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering is, in your question, is whether or not they are dogmatic, in that the practices that are passed on contain elements of those deeply held values that cannot be questioned. I think innovation itself is nothing more than passed on ideas, right? It's the idea that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, so we're picking up where they left off. So in that sense, what you and Scott discussed around collaboration and cooperation between people, that makes sense to me. So the idea of passing on deeply held values, it's sort of like, hey, we've spent centuries figuring that these are the ways to live a good life and to live meaningfully and in service of one another, and this is what we'd like to pass on to you. But I struggle with, if you change that to dogmatic religious practices, then my perspective changes quite significantly, because I think there's a lot of danger embedded in dogmatism.
Yeah. Is the problem with dogma is that it's not an entire uh, conceptualization of the truth, but it can be, depending on the dogma, it can be a safe um what's the word, a safe place to commit. You know what I mean? For example,
Yeah, it
I
could be
have the
better.
Ten
It could be better
Commandments.
than despair. It could be better than
Yeah.
it could be better than nothing.
For example, like I could have the Ten Commandments, and like maybe one commandment tells me, honor your father and your mother. And so I don't necessarily, when I can commit to that dogma, I don't necessarily need to know entirely why is it that it's good for me to honor my father and my mother, right? But I can just commit to it and know that it's gonna be good. But that doesn't mean that we should not explore why is it that it's good. We doesn't mean that we cannot ask why is it that it's good to do that. But why? That doesn't mean that we cannot do that. Now, it that's why I was saying, like, it depends on the
It
religion,
it can,
because there's
depending on the
religions.
religion. I think
Yeah.
and I think you can find dogmatic uh, belief structures in multiple religions. Some
Yeah.
of them, I think it's more prevalent in the year 26 than others. But in any case, I don't see how you can both pursue um, everything you can be and the agency required with that without staring into the abyss and asking questions that are very dangerous questions to ask. So, as a
Mhm.
framework, it's almost like there's an elementary school version. I can understand a framework being better than no framework. But
Yeah.
once you start to implement the tyrannical aspect of it, which is, yeah, we can discuss this, but the law stays, then I think that contradicts, or it conflicts with the path to self-actualization.
I can see that, but the problem is like so that's what I would say. Like it's okay. Like should I just call in the dragon so we have like the exchange? But because it feels like you want to argue against it. Yeah, am I
No,
or like
I think we're having a great discussion about it. I think I'm
I know
arguing for it, or against it.
and against it.
And
Yeah.
against it, because we can discuss the definition of religious practice, because I think
Yeah.
to be frank, I think most people hear religious practice and assume dogmatic belief. So I think
Yeah.
that's more common. And so in that case, I would argue against. I would say there are aspects that are very valuable, and that's been well discussed. But I think we haven't spent as much time discussing the risks associated with dogmatic belief. And
Okay.
that's so, but I think we just have, like, I think I feel
Yeah.
fairly good that we've
No.
covered.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Like, I think here's what we can do. Like, let me just call in the dragon, and then we'll have the same exchange, and we can like be like, okay, I agree and disagree with these bits of the statement, and we can work it out through there. It sounds good. That sounds good. Just so that because I feels like I'm trying to explain it, but at the same time I'm kind of like debating it. So I might as well just like we might as well just like start this sort of like this pairing.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought we were already doing that.
No, no, okay. Let me just go into dragon real quick. One sec.
Sure, of course. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. All right. Sorry about that, Jared. Yeah, I really wanted to jump in this and like discuss this whole thing together. So like, there's a sense in which like what you're saying is actually very, very powerful and true. And it's something that needs to be discussed openly, but I guess like the traditional let's just argue from a Christian perspective, like the traditional argument for eh, like okay, there's a sense in which there's a difference between doctrine and dogma as well. Because so doctrine, I guess we could say, is something that all church fathers have understood to be dead truth. And to the extent that it's dead truth, then there's no need for us to question it or change it. Like we can maybe ask why. We can maybe like debate if there's like certain exceptions to the rule and things like that. But to the extent that it's dead truth, then then it's useful to commit to them. That's why it would be a useful schema to have. For example, like when we say um, love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your body, right? As like one of the first commandments, for example, as the first commandment. Then, to that extent, like, why would I want to go against that doctrine when I can already see how it applies, how it applies to all of the other different ways that the faith is being useful to me and millions of other people. You know what I mean? How I can understand it from a theological perspective on how it applies to all of these different other rules, how it applies to my life and the life of everybody else. And then like I have like a whole bunch of evidence for it, but then also I have like in my personal experience, and then I don't have to attack it like as in like we can discuss it and then we can talk about it, but it doesn't there wouldn't be a need for me to sort of try to come up with like a new innovation on like I'm not I'm going to flip it. I'm not gonna put God at the top of the thing that needs to be as the very first commandment, as the thing that needs to be to deserve the proper worship. You know what I mean? Whereas there's other things that perhaps they're not quite as clear what they are. Let's say dead truth, but sometimes are held from by religions to be comparable. So uh, that's when it gets very, very dangerous, I think. And it's it's difficult to be able to tell the difference between one and the other, because they sound almost at face value basically the same, and you require like a commitment through faith and action in the world to be able to tell the qualitative difference. You will have to like look at the consequences of all of the different, you know, commitments to those doctrines or dogmas, and then you would be able to do a qualitative analysis between one or the other. Uh, you know, it's hard, because it's obviously like, if you make already a commitment to one religion, then you are running by those schemas. So for example, like a Muslim would say that Jesus is not the Messiah, right? And they would say like, no, we respect Jesus a lot, and all of these things, but Jesus is not the Messiah. Whereas a Christian would say, no, like Jesus is the Messiah, right? And those are those different doctrines, right? But then you have to, you know, it's hard to be able to I guess, um what would you say, it's hard to make it obvious to the individual when it is inside of that one religion, to see that those schemas as good or bad. But then there's definitely a qualitative difference between one or the other. You know what I mean? But you have to do like you would have to do like a grand analysis of what are the consequences of like holding that belief versus the other. You know what I mean? And so, to an extent, I guess it does depend on the type of religion. You know, it does depend on the quality of the religion as well, that we will be talking about. So, you know, if we say religious practices like us in general, then I don't know, can we say that it's all religious practices that are like that? Or because clearly, like for example, committing to, say for example, a cult, that would be a type of religious practice, right? But then it wouldn't be the same as, say for example, I don't know, Islam or Christianity. You know what I mean? So
Well, I don't know if it's that simple.
okay.
Like I don't know if it's, again, it's because a religion can also be perceived as a shared set of deeply held values, and so you can extend it to all kinds of groups of. Sorry if the audio has gotten worse. I had to plug in my phone. It was dying, so I hope you can hear me okay now.
No, we're good. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so so for me, it depends on how you define the religious. And then even when you get into religions and you start to, so, you can start to assess the type of dogmas I'm talking about. So look at how Christianity is divided into various types of Christianity. And even with that, there's fundamentalism and, um, where does God fit between state and personal belief? And there's many different orientations, and even you get two Christians in the same room, and the likelihood that they're going to agree on which are the dogmatic beliefs and which can be negotiated is really high as well. So for me, the idea of passing on battle-tested ideas through generations is just obviously good practice. Um, and I would say there's a lot of people out there who have gotten themselves into a lot of trouble by questioning some of those things before they understood them perhaps as well as they should. And that's one of the reasons that these teachings are important enough to pass on. It's like, I'm going to share with you these extremely important this extremely important framework to save you a lot of time and misery and potentially a high risk existence. Um, but some people will go ask those questions anyways, and they should be able to come to similar conclusions. And where I struggle is in the psychological pursuit of agency, for example, or we spoke a lot about cognitive dissonance. I imagine the dissonance that you risk in a dogmatic environment because you raise the potential for fear to ask questions. You've created a conflict between agency, which is I need to figure this out for myself, and belonging, which is I don't want to be judged or thrown out of this group that I hold deeply close to my value system. And both belonging and agency are, in addition with competence, fundamental to self-actualization. So I think you risk standing in the way of human development if you don't create the space to ask those questions. Now, they're high-risk questions. I think people should take them seriously. But this is where I think if you pass on the dogma and the framework, you do run into that limitation at some point in time.
Mm. I see what you mean, and I think that that is a very good criticism, to say the least. It's actually on point, but there is a sense to, like, to address the concern you have for like the different type of dogmas or things or set of beliefs that are sometimes contradictory, even within like for example, let's just say that ultimately there has to be one truth. We cannot just, like ultimately, one of, or a lot of the different denominations have to be wrong, and ultimately there has to be one truth, you know. So to the extent that there are truths that are shared among all Christians, for example, those truths we could already say like, well, those are, you know, uh, at least in terms of like probability, those are the more likely, you know, I guess doctrines that we could call the truth. But then on the ones that we have some disagreement, then we should be able to work it out by what are their what are the implications or following those doctrines, for the individual and for the collective. And so, I think I agree with you definitely that, it to a large extent it has to do with like the type of religion and how much room it allows for this type of like dogmas to be questioned. And then I also agree with you that there's this sense in which we cannot entirely just think of the collective and not of the individual, and how the individual pursuit for the truth also plays into the question. And part of that individual pursuit for the truth means also asking questions and means challenging the status quo, and it means like asking very uncomfortable questions. But you know there is a sense in which there are ways of asking those questions that are not also detrimental, but there are also ways of asking those questions that are detrimental, that are like full adversarial, in a sense. So, while there is clearly some space for some, I guess, what would you say, adversarial dynamic within a body, it needs to be executed in the right type of way, and that's where also the same type of schemas and scripts come into play. For example, there is this story in the Bible, very very interesting. Right after the story of Noah, uh, Noah, after the whole flood, he encounters like land, and then he plants the first vineyard, and he from that vineyard he produces wine, and then he drinks a little bit too much, and then he becomes drunk. After that, his sons find him, and his son, I think it's Ham, uh, sees him, and he starts making fun of him. Is Ham or Cam? Anyways, he makes fun of him, and he calls his other brothers, and then he tells them, "Hey, look at my father. He's drunk and naked over there in that corner, and he's trying to make fun of him." But then his other two brothers come in, and then they, out of respect, they turn their backs to him, and they grab a blanket and they go and cover him. And then Noah wakes up, and then he curses Ham. Like what that is also that story also tries to show us, for example, is through this narrative is trying to give us like a type of pattern of the world, in like, okay, there are ways in which like obviously the body, or like the source of authority, the father, for example, sometimes is going to make mistakes, and it doesn't mean that you're not supposed to address them, but it means that you're supposed to address them in a respectful manner. um not in the way that, for example, Ham was doing, like exposing the nakedness of of his father, and just like calling everybody to make fun of him, and like show the nakedness of Noah for having made a mistake. But uh, the way to do it is the way that the other two brothers did it, where like they are respectful of the father, and then they go and cover him, but then to an extent is like they fix the issue, you know, while still maintaining the respect for the authority, and so there are ways in which we're also being taught, when you approach it, like when you approach a religion as a source to try to get to the source of understanding the good, then you can learn from it and also be, I guess, critical of it with some respect and reverence. You can have critical thinking while you're analyzing it, and that's what you're supposed to do, because this is actually one of the ways that you can get out of, like, say, committing to certain type of religions that are not actually aligned with what is the good. Like, I don't think God it's ever saying like you need to commit to something just blindly, but he's saying like, you need to I think what he's trying to say is like you need to seek him.
So
That's ultimately what you need to do, and obviously for that's why there's grace as well, because you need to also ask questions and make mistakes along the way. But it doesn't mean that you should just entirely like expose the nakedness of your father along the way all the time, and just like make fun of it and turn your back against the whole
yeah.
authority. You know what I mean?
So I think you make a good case, and I can, in terms of the way to approach uh, dogma with openness, uh, and try and do it in a respectful manner. So I can hear that, but I don't think it's a reflection of what actually happens in society. And so even if I define religion as shared, deeply held values, then I could point to cancel culture and say when people questioned their beliefs, they were shut down. And that was tyrannical and unhelpful. And the alternative to talking is more aggressive conflict. And that to me is a trademark of dogmatism, is the end of the conversation. And so you could say, well, that person was offensive or they didn't have the right approach. But if you're too strict around that, now you're starting to dictate approach and you're approaching censorship again. And so, you can learn about socialization, and you don't have to learn about it through narrative examples in religion to find out that people like to be hurt, like the Carl Rogers example. You can find out that if you want to be successful in a discussion with someone, there are patterns that you can follow that have proven historically successful, and probably some religions teach those patterns. That the pattern exists, to me, points to the idea of truth. But that it was instructed by a religion in and of itself doesn't point to it being truth. Merely that it's empirically self-evident is what makes it point to truth. The idea that there would be one existing uh, truth, I mean, I think it's a very difficult case to make. I do believe in objective truth, but I don't believe someone has a manual for it.
Yeah. Well, I can see your concern in the sense that you're trying to remain careful and skeptical about like giving too much power to a source of authority. And I think there is a case you know to make for that. But at the same time, let's just say, okay, there is a sense in which the reason why we call Christ the way, the truth, and the life is there is a reason why we give, or why we understand it as that, because the Bible is so much more than just like a collection of narratives that you can just like align yourself, or that were discovered through time so that you can align yourself to them. It's more like a narrative that was carefully crafted so that you can get the entirety of the wholeness of the truth, or at least that's the promise that it makes, you know? And so obviously, like, those that the promise, to be able to find that promise being truth or false, you cannot like test it empirically say, like with a test tube, for example. You cannot, but what you can do is that you can commit to it through faith, and then see how it unfolds in your life, you know. And so, but that doesn't mean that you will not be able to find these patterns somewhere else. Like, say, for example, that's why for example, Aquinas and Augustine did a very good effort to unite Neoplatonism to Catholicism, because there is a sense in which those two, you know, traditions were approaching at trying to, what would you say, explicitly determine what is the good, and what is the process of the cultivation of virtue. And they, in the sense that they're both aligned, one perhaps being more explicit about it in the sense of like philosophical and dialogical exchange, and the other one showing it through narratives, which I think makes it even more powerful and much more rich. There's a sense in which, like, for example, when you compare Dostoevskian novels with Nietzsche's philosophy, there's a lot of parallels in there, but there's a very strong sense in which Dostoevsky is able to explain through narratives, even things that he himself was not able to understand. Why is it that it was like that? For example, characters like in The Brothers Karamazov, Ivan and Alyosha, like both of them, like Ivan being like a clearly very savvy and very rational thinker, like making all of these very strong arguments for atheism. But you can clearly see in the whole book how Alyosha is like a a good man, a much better man, and even that wouldn't register so easily in like Dostoevsky's own mind, but he produced the work. But it would puzzle him. Why is it that knowing that we're committing to this idea of a godless narrative, why is it that when I create a character that is perhaps um it's naive, and perhaps is not as rational, is not as like intelligent as Ivan, how is it that his actions are actually clearly seen to be showing of what the better man is? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's a sense in which narrative allows you to put out all of these symbols that are way more richer in like in what you can extract from them. And so obviously that's not to say that all narratives have the same capability of like giving you access to this type of thing. Like they do, but not on the same quality. There's like you could organize them in a type of like you know in the quality that they can give you, and you could say that to an extent, if we understand the story of Christ as being the truth, the way, and the life, then perhaps it could be also understood to a large degree as the story, like the cosmological narrative. And if that were the case, and if we can see it how it like aligns with like the good, then I guess we could say that that is the truth, because like to an extent the truth has to be something that descends from the good. It has to be, the truth needs to be something that comes from what is the good. Because how can we even qualify something as good if it's as true if it's not part of that. I don't know, that source of like that gives life to everything else. In the same way, for example, Plato makes this example in the Republic, like in the same way that light allows you to see things, but it transcends all of the things that are out there. The good allows you to have knowledge of things, in that same type of way. So allowing you to have knowledge of things, it allows you to actually determine what is true and what is not. So I know that that is like a whole, that is like a lot of different, I'm borrowing for so many different topics, and I'm probably already like going in several different tangents, but it's hard to talk about these things because it's like, they're so encompassing of so many very deep subjects that it's hard not to like go on weird tangents. So like yeah, but that's kind of like what I would say about it. Like, I guess to summarize a little bit would be that i- your your instinct is right in saying that we should be very cautious of dogmatic beliefs, but that's not to say that committing to a certain like to certain dogmas are not going to help you get closer to what is the truth, because it could very well be that some some dogmas have already pinned down what is the truth, and then by committing to it, you might be able to participate on that truth.
Yeah, it's are you process oriented or objective oriented? And so I think that someone could be very or strongly oriented towards their value system, and it could work out very well for them. But to um, to have them decide between belonging and what they believe is, to me, to create a potentially immoral conflict. And that so there's actually a risk to, well, I mean, it's tyrannical in essence to make it a condition for belonging that you cannot question.
Definitely, I think
Yeah.
it definitely is, but it's not, that's why I think like that's why I think like it depends on it depends on the quality of the religion. Like it goes back to that as well, and
Well,
like
and again,
whether you can understand, whether you can understand those doctrines as like dogmas or actual schemas. You know what I mean? Like
indeed,
schemas that are healthy to be also like that we can ask why. For example, like if I would say like if there's a religion that says, you have to do this, and then you ask why, and then you immediately get a response with like sticks because you're not supposed to ask why. That's already a tell. You know what I mean? I think like a true religion that is in this in the benefit of teaching somebody, you know n- to align themselves with the good, will not shy away from you asking why, because they would they would at least show that they would have thought of this themselves, and they have figured it out. Or if they don't they or if they haven't figured out, they would at least be honest with you and be like, I don't know, but I know that I can commit to this for now, insofar as like it has worked for me in these ways, and insofar as like I can trust all the other ways in which all the other things that I have committed my faith to have worked out so far, you know. And then it's like a process, obviously, like as well of discovery, and like it's the same concept of ask and you shall receive. Then it's about that, it's not just obey and you should be forgiven. That's not where it says that. It's like ask, actually ask, and then through that process of asking, then you might be shown the way, you know.
yeah. I mean, I think that sounds reasonable, but I think we should also be realistic about how this conversation would have been received 50 years ago, even in the countries we're in today, right? So um, it hasn't always been that way, and it still isn't. And I've had many difficult conversations on this topic, as you know. Yeah. So, uh, but if you define religion as a set of deeply held values that can be questioned, then yeah, I mean that seems reasonable to me. Like I say, to me, the teetering point on the question comes back to whether or not uh, dogma is involved or not.
I think you raised some very good criticisms about this, and I think that it's true. In fact, that there has been a lot of abuse of power, and in fact, that is tyrannical. And I think to a large degree, that sort of attitude for many religions have actually smeared the name of certain religions, and to that extent that they have smeared it, it means that they were not truly aligned with the truth. But I do think that you bring some very good criticisms, and some things that have to be contended in the name of religion, from whatever religion it is that you are. Those things you have to address them, because have been some of the reasons why we committed to the death of God, of the announcement of the death of God that Nietzsche brought forward. Because that's, if there's a big criticism that he brings forward about religion, is exactly that we are committing to things just based on like the fear of getting a bad outcome, rather than actually learning morality for what it is truly. And and then people are just being told what to believe, rather than for them to discover it themselves. And I think that is a wonderful criticism. You got me this time, and I'm gonna get you next time, Jared, for sure. Ah, all right, that was good. That was good. I think we took like a good bit of time, but that was great. I really, really enjoyed that conversation, Jared.
Yeah, same here,
Good
Juan.
stuff.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
All right, Scott, tell me, how would you rate Jared on this one?
5.
5. Right on.
Thank you, Scott.
Jeez. All right. And tell me,
Start.
Jared, how would you rate yourself on this one?
I'll give myself a 4.
4. Absolutely.
Take the points.
Absolutely. Good
Take
stuff.
them and run.
uh, and with that, we have come to an end. And so, Jared, you got 30 points. That's a massive amount of points for like a one a match. I think this is the most that anybody's gotten so far.
Well,
And
Scott was
Scott, you
being very kind and generous and taking tough topics away from us too. My goodness.
Scott, you got 21
Ha-ha.
points. But I think you guys
21.
both did very, very well. They, I have something too that I need to run by you guys. So the first round of games that we did, I was like adjusting all of the point system, and I was like trying to like fine tune it here and there. So I think